Hello and welcome to IGPP Expert Talks. I'm Heena Goswami, Editorial Consultant with IGPP, Institute for Governance, Policies and Politics, New Delhi. On November 5th, 2024, the US citizens will elect their next president. The election in US has raised considerable excitement among Indian audience as well, and hence IGPP has begun an educational series to introduce the audience to the various facets of the electoral procedure in the US and reflect upon the various issues that are important to the American voters, which in turn would acquaint the audience with the social and cultural complexities of the nation. The program would further reflect upon the consequences of the voters' choice upon the larger world with particular focus on India, and highlight the role played by the Indian and other diaspora communities in the US elections. Allan Lichtman, a historian and professor at American University, developed the Keys to the White House model, which has gained significant attention for its accuracy in predicting US presidential election. Known as the Nostradamus of US presidential election, his Keys to the White House model provides a systematic method to analyze electoral outcomes by assessing 13 true or false statements or keys based on historical patterns, political realities, and broader political conditions. Unlike many modern prediction methods that rely on current polling data, Keys to the White House was designed to identify the crucial factors that determine whether the incumbent party will win and retain power in a presidential election. This model has 13 keys, each reflecting a critical aspect determining the election outcome. The model's core principle is that if 5 or less of these keys are false, the incumbent party is predicted to win. If 6 or more are wrong, the challenged party is more likely to prevail. The first key, party mandate, assesses where the incumbent party has gained seats in Congress compared to the previous midterm elections. A significant increase in the party's seats suggests a robust mandate from voters, enhancing the incumbent's chances of re-election. The second key, contest, examines if the incumbent party faces a serious challenge for its nomination. A unified party without major internal disputes is generally better positioned for success. The third key, incumbency, evaluates whether the incumbent party candidate is the sitting president. Incumbents typically benefit from the advantages of incumbency, including established visibility and experience. The fourth key, third party, looks at the presence of significant third party or independent campaigns. A lack of such campaigns reduces the risk of vote splitting, favoring the incumbent. The fifth key, short-term economy, considers the state of economy during the election campaign. An economy that is not in recession is generally favorable for the incumbent party. The sixth key, long-term economy, requires that the real per capita economic growth during the incumbent's term meets or exceeds the average growth of the previous 2 terms. This reflects the long-term health of the economy, which can influence voters' perception of the incumbent party's performance. Policy change, the seventh key, requires that the incumbent administration implements significant national policy changes. This demonstrates active governance and can positively impact the party's re-election prospects. The eighth key, social unrest, stipulates that there should be no sustained social unrest during the term. Persistent unrest can undermine public confidence in the incumbent administration. The ninth key, scandal, assesses where the incumbent administration has been involved in major scandals. Scandals can erode trust and weaken the incumbent's position. The 10th key, foreign or military failure, considers whether the incumbent administration has faced significant failures in foreign or policy affairs, which could negatively impact its re-election chances. Conversely, the 11th key, foreign or military success, looks at whether the incumbent administration has achieved major successes in these areas, as such successes can enhance the incumbent's standing. The 12th key, incumbent charisma, evaluates whether the incumbent party candidate is seen as charismatic or a national hero, traits that can enhance electoral appeal. Lastly, the 13th key, challenger charisma, assesses the charisma or national hero status of the challenging party candidate. A less charismatic challenger generally benefits the incumbent party. Overall, Lichtman's model provides a structured approach to predicting electoral outcomes by evaluating these critical factors, offering insights into the dynamics of presidential elections. Lichtman's model has demonstrated its predictive power through various election cycles. In 1984, for example, the model accurately forecasted Ronald Reagan's re-election against Walter Mondale, emphasizing Reagan's strong performance in office and the lack of a major third-party challenge. Similarly, in the contentious 2000 election, the model predicted George W. Bush's victory over Al Gore, despite the close result and the complex recount situation. As of the latest update, Lichtman's model suggests that Vice President Kamala Harris is in a strong position to retain power in the 2024 election, given that she meets 8 out of the 13 keys that indicate a favorable chance for re-election. The model evaluates key factors such as economic performance, party unity, and the absence of major scandals. In contrast, Donald Trump meets only 3 out of the 13 keys, which highlights more challenges for his campaign. This significant disparity indicates that Harris has a favorable chance of winning, provided these conditions remain stable through the election cycle. Allan Lichtman's Keys to the White House provides a historical framework for understanding presidential election outcomes. By focusing on fundamental political and historical patterns rather than transient polls, the model offers valuable insights into the factors influencing electoral results. While we are still a few weeks away from knowing who will be at the helm of affairs in the US, there's one person who's making waves for predicting what might finally unfold in the upcoming race, and rightly so, because for last 10 presidential elections, he has predicted 9 presidents correctly. Today at IGPP Expert Talks, we are very excited to be joined by the Nostradamus of US presidential election, Professor Allan Lichtman. Known for his prediction system, 13 Keys to the White House, Professor Allan Lichtman is an acclaimed historian who has authored 13 books and is a distinguished professor at the American University in Washington, D.C. Welcome to IGPP Expert Talks, sir.
Thank you.
So, in Indian media and worldwide, you are being celebrated as the Nostradamus of the US presidential election. For those unacquainted with your work, can you please provide a brief introduction to your prediction system, 13 Keys to the White House, a theory according to which one needs a majority of the 13 keys to secure a victory in the US presidential election?
Yes, the keys avoid the pundits. They're all buddies of mine, but they have no scientific basis for their opinions. They have no track record of extensive successful prediction like the keys, which have been right since I predicted Ronald Reagan's reelection long before you were born in April 1982, during the worst recession to date since the Great Depression, when his approval ratings were historically low. I also avoid the polls. The polls are snapshots. They're abused as predictors by clerks that compile polls like Nate Silver, who assured us in 2016 that Hillary Clinton had a 70 to 80% chance of winning and was fundamentally wrong. And unlike the pundits and the pollsters, the keys reflect how American presidential elections really work as votes up or down on the strength and performance of the White House party. And there are 13 true-false indicators, such that if there are 6 or more falses, because they're always phrased so an answer of true favors the re-election of the White House party, if there are 6 or more false questions, then the White House party is a predicted loser. Otherwise, they're a predicted winner.
You first came up with the model long before I was born in 1982. How has the American political landscape evolved since then? And have you felt tempted to change the keys according to the evolving circumstances, especially keeping in mind that we have social media and digital technologies that are shaping perception of the people correctly or incorrectly?
Every 4 years, some critic says to me, you have to change your keys because things have changed. We have an African American running. Never had that. America's not ready to elect an African American. We have a woman running. Never had that. We had social media. Never had that. We have a candidate who bragged in the Access Hollywood tape about bragging women by their private parts. Never had that. And I have 2 answers. Answer 1 is you can't change a model on the fly. That is a sure recipe for error. Secondly, while the keys are based on history, they are very robust developmentally. They go all the way back to 1860, in the horse and buggy days of politics, the election of Abraham Lincoln, when there were no radio, no television, no automobiles, no planes. Women didn't vote. African Americans were enslaved. We were in an agricultural economy. So the keys have survived vastly greater changes in our society, our economy, our politics, and our demography than anything we've seen in recent years.
You have predicted Kamala Harris's victory this election. Could you elaborate a little on what keys are working for her?
Yes, that doesn't quite represent the way the system works. You look at keys that are going against the White House party, and if 6 or more go against the White House party, they are predicted losers. Fewer than 6, they are predicted winners. That's the easiest way to use the system. So here are the keys that count against her. My first key is the mandate key. Based on U.S. House elections, Democrats lost U.S. House elections in 2022. That key is false. 1 down. Incumbency. Biden is no longer running. Sitting president is not running. 2 down. Incumbent charisma. Now, to win this key, you have to be one of these once-in-a-generational, transformational, across-the-board appealing candidate, like Franklin Roosevelt on the Democratic side. Well, whatever you may think of Harris, she may be a good candidate, but she isn't established as a Franklin Roosevelt. That's 3 down. Then we have foreign policy failure. I count that against the White House party because Gaza is a humanitarian disaster with no end in sight. And we don't have boots on the ground there, but America's deeply invested. That's 4 down. The only other shaky key at all is the foreign policy success key. And I give that key to the White House party because it was Biden and Biden alone that brought together the coalition of the West that stopped Putin from conquering Ukraine and then threatening America's NATO allies. Biden's continuing support has enabled Ukraine to survive for over 2.5 years and even make an incursion into Russian territory. This will go down as an historic presidential achievement. So that's still only 4 down. Even if unpredictably, I don't think this is going to happen, it's too soon, something catastrophic should happen in Ukraine, that would only be 5 keys down, still 1 short of predicting Harris's defeat. So even under the worst case scenario, my system, which has been right for 40 years, predicts that we are going to have a new and path-breaking American president, that Kamala Harris will become the first woman president of the United States, making a crack in the glass ceiling, if not entirely shattering it, and she will become the first president of mixed African and East Asian descent, kind of foreshadowing where America is actually going. We're rapidly becoming a majority-minority country.
Moving away from electoral victories, I want to discuss with you the discourse that is current in American political landscape. And we know that there are red states and then there are blue states, and they are going to vote in a predictable manner. But in other swing states or key states, what issues do you think are dominant on American voters' mind that will ultimately decide the election?
I will quote a famous Zen saying, unask the question. That's not how I analyze elections. There is no way you can predict election results by looking at swing states or trying to parse out the issues. Many candidates who were ahead on the issues lost because that's not how presidential elections really work. And I would discourage anyone in your audience from looking at elections that way. No one's developed a prediction system based on parsing out the election that way. Let me give you an analogy. You have your cup of tea, right? You pour sugar in your tea. You learn nothing by trying to parse out the individual sugar molecules, but you can learn a lot with simple integral parameters like those that define the keys to the White House. In this case, you can learn a lot from sweetness and density, even though you can't parse out the individual molecules.
Moving away then from the dominant issues to one issue that I really want you to talk about, but in a historical manner, and see how American society has evolved over it, and that is the abortion right issues. We hear a lot from political analysts, commentators, that abortion right would be an important electoral plan for Kamala Harris, and also because women form a key constituency of the Democratic Party. Many analysts say that this is a boys versus girls election. Is that an assessment that you would agree with? And historically, is it the first time that women's issues are paramount on the electoral agenda?
I would agree with it to a certain extent. Again, you can't predict elections from certainly not one issue, but no question, the Democrats believe this is a very important issue for them to emphasize, because after all, for over 50 years or so, we had Roe versus Wade in place. And so a degree of abortion rights was established across the United States. So it was really the anti-abortion forces that had the momentum, that had the passion, because they were on the wrong side. Then, of course, Roe versus Wade is overturned. There's no longer constitutional protections of abortion rights. First time in U.S. history, Supreme Court has actually abrogated a constitutional right rather than adding a constitutional right. And now it's the Democrats and the pro-choice forces that have the passion, because they've been put on the defensive. And you saw Harris making a big issue of women's reproductive rights in the debate. And Trump had no answer. He's been all over the map on the abortion issue. He obviously has no convictions, is just trying to find a convenient political space. Now, the other thing is, I don't have a full congressional elections, but while it doesn't predict a presidential election, a burning issue like abortion certainly can affect every other level of election, particularly since abortion, pro-choice referenda are on the ballot in about 10 states. And every time a pro-choice referenda, constitutional amendment is on the ballot, the voters have voted for it, even in deep red states like Kansas and Ohio.
I want to bring into focus another one of your book, White Protestant Nation, The Rise of American Conservative Movement. In all the discussions that we have had up till this point, American races, do
I
you
got it. I
think?
got it. Gunnar Myrdal, the great Swedish Nobel Prize winning sociologist in economics, called in the 1940s race the great American dilemma. That's always been the case, right from, of course, the earliest founding of the country when half the states were slave states. We fought a civil war over slavery. We had Jim Crow discrimination really in place in the South, at least until the 1960s. There remains very significant racial discrimination in America, and there is a very deep divide between Republican and Democratic positions on race. We saw Donald Trump time and again exploiting race. You know, I never would have imagined that a candidate for the historically the most important position in the history of the world would get up in front of his nation and talk about immigrants stealing dogs and cats so they can eat them. Forget about the fact that that's a brazen lie, hasn't happened, but think how racist that is, how that implies, you know, immigrants who are overwhelmingly black and brown are these barbarians who seize cats and dogs to consume them. And of course, we had Donald Trump exploiting Harris's race, saying, oh, she just turned black, you know, for political purposes. And you saw him flub that so badly in the debate. This harkens right back to Jim Crow, when white people like Trump defined the racial identity of people of color. The most notorious example was in Virginia, the one-drop rule. If you had one drop of black blood, supposedly you were black and subject to segregation and all the discriminations of Jim Crow. Yes, race has always been the American dilemma. It remains the American dilemma, and it constitutes a very important political divide in this country.
You have followed politics closely. You had a brief stint in politics yourself. How happy are you with the current, with the debate just concluding? How happy are you with the current political discourse in American politics? Uh, do you think it has become more about rhetoric rather than policy stances? Recently, Donald Trump, before the debate, he made a vague speech about economy, and Kamala Harris has remained deliberately ambiguous on issues like immigration, foreign policy. Is this a false perception maybe on our part, or do you think that that is sort of true? Politics has moved, is more about rhetoric, and does it does it augur well or not so? Because when Americans are choosing, it seems like they don't have a clear roadmap or what kind of future they want.
I don't want to be like an old fogey and say, oh, things were so much better back then and they've just gone to hell ever since then. But I do think the high point of presidential debate and discussion was the Kennedy-Nixon debates in 1960. I would encourage everyone in your audience, it's readily available on the net, to watch at least one of those debates. There were 4 of them, and virtually every adult American watched at least one of them. They were substantive. They were respectful. They were detailed. They were filled with ideas and plans. Downhill since then. We haven't ever replicated the kind of elevated discourse than we've seen in Kennedy-Nixon. So yes, I don't think America right now is as excellent and informative as it could be in terms of our political discourse.
Thank you for giving us your time. Thank you very much, sir.
Your audience, since international, can catch my continuing analysis on my live show, a YouTube live show that I do with my son. It's on at Tuesdays and Thursdays at 9 p.m. US Eastern, 9 p.m. US Eastern, and you can catch it at Allan Lichtman YouTube, ALLANLICHTMAN YouTube. And we have now almost 110,000 subscribers.
Definitely.